Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has acknowledged that Ukraine's military is currently unable to reclaim Crimea and the Donbas region from Russian occupation. Speaking to a French newspaper, Zelensky said that Ukraine's armed forces do not have the capability to oust Russian troops from occupied areas. He emphasized, however, that diplomatic pressure from the international community is the only viable option to push Moscow into negotiations. Zelensky told the French newspaper that Ukraine cannot just give up their territories and the Ukrainian constitution forbids them to do so, admitting, quote-unquote, de facto these territories are now controlled by the Russians. That's a huge admission. And that Ukraine does not have the strength to recover them, adding that Ukraine can only count on diplomatic pressure from the international community to force Russian President Vladimir Putin to sit down at the negotiating table. Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and has since taken control of around 80% of the Donbas region, including the Donetsk and Luhansk areas. In addition, Russian forces occupy parts of the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. A Ukrainian counteroffensive launched last year with the backing of Western military aid has failed to dislodge the Russian forces from these regions. Zelensky's comments have reportedly sparked debates about the future of Ukraine's territorial claims. Just last month, Zelensky said that Ukraine might abandon its goal of reclaiming these territories through military force if NATO membership was offered in return. However, the NATO has only confirmed that Ukraine will eventually be invited to join the alliance without specifying a timeline. In the year 2022, Zelensky issued a decree barring peace talks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Yet in his latest remarks, he said this stance may be subject to change. It's not about who sits across from you, it's about the position you are in when negotiating, quote-unquote. Further quoting, I don't believe we are in a weak position, but we are also not in a strong one. That's what Zelensky further emphasized, emphasizing the importance of a peace plan, basically, adding that first Ukraine needs to develop a model, an action plan, which can be presented to Putin or more broadly to the Russian people. Meanwhile, former U.S. official Keith Kellogg, who will be the key advisor to President-elect Donald Trump, co-authored a plan before the November election. The plan basically proposed freezing the front line, suspending NATO membership discussions for Ukraine, and partially lifting Western sanctions on Russia. Under this proposal, the U.S. would basically continue military support for Ukraine but would cut off aid if Zelensky refused to engage in peace talks. The Kremlin has made it clear, meanwhile, that peace is only possible if Ukraine agrees to surrender Crimea and the other 4 regions Russia claims as its own. Moscow's conditions including Ukraine withdrawing its forces from the cities of Kherson and Zaporizhia, which had a combined pre-war population of around 1 million people. Dmitry Peskov, the press secretary for Putin, has said that Russia does not want a ceasefire. It wants peace only after its conditions are met and all its goals are achieved. As the conflict drags on, Zelensky's admission marks a huge shift in Ukraine's strategy in a way and raises crucial questions about the path forward in its ongoing struggle against Russia. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.